It's been 3 months since I cut them off. 3 months of silence where there used to be obligation, expectation, and the dull ache of being unseen. Some days the quiet is a profound relief, like shedding a heavy cloak I'd worn my entire life. Other days, it feels like a void, a reminder that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally chose, repeatedly, not to. And then the calls started again, frantic and desperate. Hearing my mother's voice, laced with genuine panic this time. After the stone silence since I ended things, it's a strange, unsettling kind of satisfaction. Or maybe not satisfaction, exactly. Just finality. A morbid confirmation that I made the right choice, even if it was the hardest one. My name is Ethan. I'm in my mid-30s. I run my own consulting firm in a demanding field, structural engineering, dealing with large-scale infrastructure projects. It's a job that requires precision, grit, and the ability to solve complex problems under pressure. It's a job I built from the ground up through sheer hard work, late nights, and sacrifice in my 20s. I'm divorced, a painful chapter involving a betrayal I'm still processing, but it gave me the most important person in my life, my daughter, Sarah. She's 7 now, bright, funny, and my absolute world. Everything I do, every long hour I work, every boundary I fight for is for her. The divorce taught me the brutal cost of misplaced trust and the absolute necessity of protecting the people you love most and yourself from toxic forces. My story isn't unique, I know that. You hear about it all the time on places like this. The golden child and the scapegoat. In my family, Brandon was the golden child. He's my younger brother, just a few years younger, always the sensitive one, the creative one, needing support to find his path. And I was the responsible one, the one who could handle things, the one they didn't need to worry about. This translated from as early as I can remember into Brandon getting everything, attention, praise, financial handouts, excuse failures while I got expectations, and silence when I succeeded. I remember being 10 and spending months building a complex model bridge for a school science fair. It won first place regionally. My parents nodded. "That's nice, Ethan." The same week, Brandon drew a decent picture of a dog, and it was immediately framed and hung in the living room, with effusive praise about his artistic talent for weeks. When I was 16, I worked a part-time job stacking shelves at a grocery store to save up for a beat-up used car, needing reliable transport for school and work. Brandon, who didn't have a job, was given a relatively new car for his 18th birthday because he needed freedom to explore his music. At college, I worked through summers and took out loans to supplement the partial scholarship I earned, driven to minimize my debt. Brandon dropped out of 3 different programs: music, photography, something online, each time cushioned by my parents paying for his tuition, rent, and essential equipment while telling him it just wasn't the right fit. My graduation, with honors, felt like a footnote compared to the fuss made over Brandon finally getting a low-wage, part-time job at a coffee shop at age 25. At least he's stable now, my mom sighed, seemingly oblivious to the irony. Being the responsible one also came with a different kind of burden as they got older. After my dad retired from his middle management job and my mom stopped her part-time receptionist work, they started complaining about money constantly. Health issues, rising costs, their pensions not being enough. About 6 years ago, they sat me down with teary eyes and a stack of bills, painting a picture of impending financial ruin. They needed help. Family helps family, right? Naively, or perhaps desperately hoping that finally this would be the thing that showed them I was valuable, that I was needed, I agreed to send them a monthly sum. It started smaller, then grew to $1,200 a month as their needs seemed to grow. They spun tales of needing it for prescriptions, property taxes, essential house repairs, helping them just scrape by. Meanwhile, their Facebook profiles showed trips, new furniture, and regular dinners out. And Brandon, despite his inconsistent work, always seemed to have the latest gear for his hobbies, nice clothes, and go on decent vacations with his wife, Chloe, and their triplets. The inconsistency between their hardship and their lifestyle, coupled with the endless stream of minor emergencies for Brandon that required parental funds, slowly eroded my naive hope. I started to feel less like a loving son helping out and more like an unofficial, unappreciated bank. A quietly simmering resentment began to build. Therapy after my divorce helped me see the patterns for what they were, not just poor parenting, but emotional manipulation and financial exploitation. I started keeping records, not because I planned something like this, but because I felt a need to ground myself in facts when their version of reality felt so distorted. I saved their texts asking for money, noted the dates of my transfers, and even screenshotted some of Brandon and Chloe's social media posts that seemed to contradict my parents' claims of poverty. It was a quiet, almost subconscious act of self-preservation, building a factual defense against the gaslighting. I just didn't know how crucial those records would become. This past month, I was preparing for the biggest pitch of my career. My firm had been shortlisted for a massive infrastructure project, potentially worth millions over several years. Landing this contract would not only secure my company's future for the next decade, but would also be a definitive professional achievement, proving that my hard work had paid off in a tangible, significant way. I had poured weeks, months into preparing this pitch. Every detail was meticulously planned. It was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon downtown. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Then, chaos struck my childcare arrangements. My regular nanny had a sudden, severe family medical emergency out of state. My backup sitter came down with a terrible flu. Every daycare I called on short notice was full. Bringing Sarah, a bubbly 7-year-old, to a high-stakes corporate pitch was impossible. I was running out of options. I just needed someone to watch her for a crucial 4-hour window, from noon, when I had to leave, until I got back after the pitch. My parents lived just under an hour away. They were retired, always posting on Facebook about their blessed lives and how much they love being grandparents. Despite the history, I called my mother. I explained the situation calmly. The importance of the pitch, the childcare emergency, the short time frame I needed help. I emphasized it was just a few hours. Sarah would have her Legos. She just needed lunch and supervision. My mother's response was immediate and delivered with that familiar, weary sigh she reserved for my requests. "Oh, Ethan, I don't know. Your father's back is just awful today. He can barely move. And I've got a terrible migraine myself. It's just not a good day for us." I felt that familiar sink in my stomach, but I pushed back gently. "Mom, I understand if you're not feeling well, but it's just 4 hours. I could drop her off, bring lunch, pick her up the second I'm done. This pitch is huge. It could change everything for my company." She was unmoved. "We just can't, Ethan. We really need a rest day. Why don't you ask Brandon?" I gritted my teeth. "Mom, you know Brandon works Wednesdays. He's got the triplets anyway." "Well," she said, her tone shifting, becoming slightly sharper, "I'm sure you'll figure something out. You always do." That line, "you always do," it hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just a dismissal. It was the summation of my entire life in their eyes. I was the one who always figured it out, the one who didn't need help, the one whose needs were secondary, because I was responsible. Brandon needed their help, their energy, their resources. I didn't. And that meant I wasn't worth their time, even for 4 hours that could secure my future. I hung up the phone, the silence on my end deafening. There was no arguing, no changing their minds. I had to cancel the pitch. Informing my business partner, Mark, was one of the hardest calls I'd ever made. He worked just as hard on this. He took it better than I expected, mostly just frustrated at the lost opportunity. They awarded the contract to Sterling Corp. He told me a few days later, his voice flat. Heard through the grapevine that pitch alone is setting them up for the next 7, maybe 10 years. Multi-million-dollar win. Millions. Lost. Because my parents couldn't spare 4 hours. A week went by. I was still reeling from the professional and personal blow. The frustration and hurt were a constant knot in my chest. I tried to focus on damage control at work, assuring my team and remaining clients that we would bounce back. I spent extra time with Sarah, pushing down the complex emotions the whole ordeal brought up. My parents didn't call to check in or apologize again. It was like the day just hadn't happened for them. Then I saw it. Chloe, Brandon's wife, isn't malicious, just enthusiastic on social media. Her Instagram was public, and usually harmless posts about the triplets or Brandon's latest gig. But this time, there was an album titled Tropical Paradise with the Best Grandparents Ever. My parents were beaming, standing on a white sand beach, crystal clear water behind them, with Brandon, Chloe, and the triplets. My blood ran cold. I scrolled through the photos, a sick feeling building in my gut. There were dozens. Photos of them at expensive resort restaurants, lounging by a private pool, wearing matching leis, posing with exotic birds, taking boat rides. The dates confirmed it. They had left for this trip the day after they refused to watch Sarah. A week-long luxury vacation, while I was canceling a career-defining pitch because they were too tired or had a bad back and a migraine. Rage, cold and clear, flooded me. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I felt utterly violated. I pulled up my banking app, looked at the recurring $1,200 payment, looked at Chloe's geotag location for the resort, did a quick search on resort prices, flights, activities. A trip like that, for 7 people, for a week, likely cost upwards of $20,000. Maybe more. And my parents, living on a fixed income, complaining constantly about bills, had funded this? The math didn't add up unless the money was coming from somewhere else. Somewhere predictable. Somewhere like my bank account. I pulled up the records I'd been keeping. Text about their urgent need for cash for a roof repair months ago, matching a large withdrawal from my account. Photos of Brandon with new, expensive audio equipment shortly after I sent an emergency fund for their property taxes. Their vague answers whenever I asked exactly where the money went. And now this lavish trip. The pattern wasn't just emotional favoritism. It was calculated financial exploitation. They weren't just failing to support me. They were actively undermining my stability, taking my money under false pretenses, and using it to fund the golden child's lifestyle and lavish treats. They were using me to pay for the very dynamic that was destroying our family. The realization solidified into an icy resolve. I didn't call them in a fit of rage. I waited a day. I wrote down the key points, the dates, the amounts, the photos. I planned a conversation. This wasn't about venting. It was about laying out the facts and establishing a boundary that should have been set years ago. I called them the next evening. My father answered, sounding cheerful. "Ethan, long time no see, how are you?" My voice was flat. "I'm calling about the trip." A pause. Then my mother's voice, suddenly strained. "Oh, that. We were going to tell you. You told me Dad's back was out and you had a migraine." I cut her off, my voice still calm but firm. "You told me you needed a rest day and couldn't watch Sarah for 4 hours. For hours that cost me a contract worth millions for my business. Meanwhile, you were getting on a plane to a luxury resort for a week with Brandon, Chloe, and the triplets." They stumbled over each other, a torrent of excuses. It was planned months ago. The boys needed a break. It was just a little trip that cost over $20,000. I asked, my voice rising slightly. "Money you claim you don't have for essential bills? Money I've been sending you $1,200 a month for years, believing you were struggling to make ends meet." My mother started crying. "How dare you accuse us? We used that money for bills. For the house. You're being cruel." "Don't lie to me anymore," I said, the calm returning, colder now. "I have the records. I've seen the dates. I know the money I sent for property taxes coincided with Brandon needing a new car. I know the money for your supposed roof repair paid for his music equipment. And I know the money I sent last month, supposedly for prescriptions, went towards your flights or that resort. You've been taking my money, under false pretenses, while prioritizing Brandon's every whim over my daughter's basic need for childcare and my ability to provide for her." My father's voice boomed, full of anger. "He's your brother. He needed help. You're successful. You don't need the money like he does. He needed help because he's never been allowed to face the consequences of his own irresponsibility because you always used my hard work and my money to bail him out." I countered, every pent-up frustration of decades boiling just beneath the surface. "And my money is for me and for Sarah. It's for building a secure future for my child, something you actively hindered when you cost me that contract." Then came the crucial part. "I'm done," I stated, my voice firm and clear. I'm done being your retirement plan, your backup fund for Brandon, and the son you only call when you need something. I'm done with the lies, the favoritism, and the exploitation. I'm cutting you off. Effective immediately, you will not receive another dollar from me. I will not be answering your calls, and I will not be visiting. This is not a negotiation. This is the consequence of your choices. Silence hung heavy on the line for a moment. Then, their tone shifted from anger and denial to shock and burgeoning panic. "Ethan, you can't," my mother wailed. "We need that money. What about the mortgage?" "That's your problem," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "You chose who to prioritize. You chose where my money went. Now, you need to figure out the consequences of those choices." But we used some of that money for his debt," my father stammered, the panic evident. "He got into some trouble. We had to help him. We were relying on your payments to cover things this month." They had used my money to bail Brandon out of debt, not just fund hobbies or trips, further cementing his irresponsibility and their enabling. And they were so reliant on my payments that using it for this emergency immediately put them in jeopardy. "That sounds like a consequence of your decision to prioritize Brandon's debt over your own financial stability and over my support for you," I said. "Perhaps you should ask Brandon for the money now. See if he can bail you out." I didn't wait for a response. I hung up the phone. 3 months of silence followed. No calls, no texts. Aunt Carol called a couple of times, hinting that my parents were very upset and didn't understand why I was doing this. I explained calmly and briefly what had happened, focusing on a lost contract and the discovery of the trip funded by my money, and their admission about Brandon's debt. Aunt Carol, bless her heart, tried to minimize it. "Oh, well, Brandon's always been a bit troubled, you know, and they're old. They probably just weren't thinking." I gently corrected her, explaining that exploiting one child to enable another wasn't thoughtless. It was a deliberate pattern. She didn't really get it, just sighed about family. My life has been quieter, simpler in some ways. The anger subsided, replaced by a weary sadness for the family I never truly had. I've focused intensely on work, successfully landing a couple of smaller projects that help compensate for the lost contract. More importantly, I've focused on Sarah, ensuring she feels seen, loved, and secure. She hasn't asked about her grandparents much. Their involvement was always sporadic anyway. And then, today, the call started. Missed calls at first, then frantic voicemails. I listened to one. My mother's voice, trembling, bordering on hysteria. "Ethan, please. You have to call us. We're in terrible trouble. The bank, the house, please." I knew this moment would come. Their unsustainable lifestyle, fueled by my money and Brandon's needs, had finally caught up to them now that my support was gone. I took a deep breath. This was it, the final act. I called him back. My mother answered instantly, her voice a mix of relief and panic. "Ethan, oh, thank God. Please, you have to help us. The bank is foreclosing. We're going to lose the house next week if we don't come up with the money." Foreclosure. The most severe consequence short of a medical emergency they couldn't pay for. Their financial house of cards had collapsed, and they immediately turned to me, the son they deemed less worthy, the one they'd exploited for years, to fix it. "Foreclosure?" I asked, my voice calm, almost detached. "That sounds serious. What happened?" They launched into a panicked explanation. Missed mortgage payments, compounding fees, a loan they took out, presumably for Brandon's debt, that they couldn't service without my income, unexpected repair costs on a house they'd ignored. It was a torrent of self-inflicted woes, all stemming from their poor choices and reliance on my money. They didn't apologize for anything, didn't acknowledge why I cut them off. It was just, "We need money now. You have to give it to us." "You're right, it is serious," I said, cutting through their panic. "And it's a direct consequence of the choices you made." "Choices?" My father's voice cut in, angry again despite the fear. "What choices? We're your parents. You have a responsibility." "My responsibility is to Sarah now," I stated, my voice firm. "Your choices led you here. You chose to prioritize Brandon's lifestyle and debts over your own financial security. You chose to lie to me and exploit my hard work. You chose to cost me $1 million opportunity instead of watching your granddaughter for a few hours. You chose to take the money I sent for bills and spend it on luxury trips and bailing out Brandon. But we'll be homeless, my mother cried. That's a terrifying situation, I agreed, acknowledging the reality without giving ground. And you need help. But I told you 3 months ago I was done being your financial safety net, especially when that net was being used to fund the very behavior that hurt me. I showed you the evidence. I told you the consequences. I paused, taking a breath. Then I delivered the lines I'd thought about during the quiet months. The lines that were the logical conclusion to their life's work of favoritism. You always told me Brandon needed you more, I said, my voice clear and steady. You poured your time, your energy, and yes, you even used my money into supporting Brandon, enabling him, saving him from every mistake. You built your lives around your golden child, ensuring he was always taken care of, always prioritized. You made it abundantly clear he was the son who needed and deserved your resources. Their silence on the other end was profound. They knew where I was going. Well, I finished, the words sharp but delivered without yelling. Now is the time for that investment to pay off. Now, you need help you can't get on your own. You need a significant amount of money immediately to save your home. You need the person you always put first to step up. You need Brandon. My mother gasped. My father sputtered something I couldn't make out. Call Brandon. I repeated, making it an instruction, a redirection. Tell him the house is being foreclosed on. Tell him you used the money I sent for bills and his past debts. Tell him the golden child needs to save the day. See if the son you built your lives around will save you from losing everything. I didn't wait for their response, their pleas, or their anger. I simply, calmly hung up the phone. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't just an absence of noise. It felt like the sound of a door closing forever. A heavy door, sealing off a room filled with decades of pain, resentment, and unresolved conflict. There was no triumph, no real joy, just a profound sadness for the family that was broken long before today, and a quiet, firm sense of having finally done the right thing for myself and for Sarah. My obligation is to her future now, and that future won't be built on the ruins of my past or funded by the toxic dynamics I finally escaped. What happens next for my parents and Brandon? I honestly don't know. And for the first time, I realize it's no longer my problem to solve.